The scariest situation I walk into is when the CEO is the smartest person in the room. That's a problem waiting to happen. If you study great success, 9 out of 10 are surrounded by a group of advisors that are smarter than them.
Search Party is sponsored by Boulay, Kilpatrick, Townsend & Stockton, and Oberly Risk Strategies. The lead sponsor is NCL Partners.
Hello and welcome to Search Party. I'm David Snow, your host. And today we're joined by Jason Williford, a serial entrepreneur and a board member and executive advisor to Culture Index, which we're going to learn about. Now, you are in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, leaning more on the Fort Worth side. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yep. In the middle of the metro, but born in Fort Worth.
Excellent. We introduce you as a serial entrepreneur. So we're going to get into what your current gig is. And we also want to learn about your history and why you have gravitated to smaller businesses as a way to grow wealth and to grow success. But why don't we just start with Culture Index? Because the story of Culture Index and your involvement in Culture Index really says a lot about entrepreneurialism generally, and also your approach to sort of building a business. Give us the overview. What is Culture Index?
Yeah, so Culture Index, I stumbled upon it right after they started about 21 years ago. And I really discounted it significantly when I ran across it. They actually sent me the primary survey 5 times before I finally took it, because we took personality inventories and whatnot in college. I'm sure everybody at this point, they're very, aware of DISC and Myers-Briggs, and there's hundreds of them out there. So I did the survey, and long story short, about 6 months later, that was in 2009, ended up signing a contract and moved into a 2-year licensing process, and just started my 18th year about 2 weeks ago now of doing Culture Index. So what we do is we work with high growth companies. We're in 31, soon to be 32 languages all over the globe. And really what we're doing is we're demystifying behavioral analytics as it correlates to scale. We're able to predict and see how a person's going to respond in a certain environment, and then translating that into how that's going to scale the business. So when I ran across this and I realized it actually was on the bleeding edge of the science, that if this could really decode the human problem, the challenge with dealing with people as it scales, it didn't matter what kind of business I invested into. If this was legit, then it would help me invest and scale businesses for the rest of my life if I could figure this skill out. And we just work with high growth, starting with the board or ownership, CEO down, by installing a set of best practices around the science and removing all the guesswork on the people. I use animal analogies growing up on a farm. Now that I've got the animal on the farm, what kind of food and water plan does that animal need in order to not only survive, but thrive at the highest level?
So does it start with an assessment of what the company needs, and then you go out and you find the kind of people who will thrive in that role? Or is it a person-by-person screen that you're conducting?
Yeah, good question. So it starts with the macro objectives. You've got to understand what are the goals of the shareholders. And then you overlay that with assessing the team that's in place.
What is an example of some characteristics or attributes that a person would have that would make them not a good fit for a business scaling going forward?
That's a big question, and that really does depend on the position, the existing team, and the appetite for risk. So think of it, we measure time horizon thinking, risk tolerance, agency, analytical thinking versus inductive thinking. So when you take all those things and you roll them into play, you really have to overlay that, David, with a specific situation. Another framework I like to use is the Adizes corporate life cycle, and plot out where the company is in that, because you can overhire. I've seen that happen. We've all seen that happen, right? Where you outgrow your balance sheet in a hurry. We've unfortunately all seen that. And so you can overhire just like you can underhire. The other side of that coin is, I should have hired these people sooner. Well, sometimes there's a reason why you didn't. So you can go either way.
Well, you've been involved with Culture Index now for 18 years, as you say. What has been some pushback or skepticism that you've come across over the years, and how have you pushed back on that skepticism?
Yeah. So the skepticism comes from the same skepticism that I had, right? Which is belongs in HR, or this is just another inventory. And so our whole go-to-market strategy is we just do some complimentary consulting to show people the math is the math. We know the math is right. So think of it as an X-ray machine. Once you get a solid X-ray, if you can have an expert interpret it and apply it, it's just a game of math. I had actually a client, David, who was hiring against the data. So they were going back to gut hiring and resume hiring, and they made like 3 bad hires in a row. And it's like they just kept sticking their hand, and the statistics were like 9 out of 10 failure rate, 9 out of 10 failure rate, 9 out of 10. So when you know the math is right, and it's not an opinion, it's not a theory, it's just a matter now of the application of the statistics to the certain situation.
I think you used the term, is it gut hiring? Is that a reference to probably what most, especially entrepreneurs, do, which is, I think this person seems like they're going to be a good CFO based on how I feel. And so you're saying that that's not the best approach?
Definitely not. I mean, the statistics scream that. Just spend 30 seconds on chat and you'll see the math on that and the odds. So you're saying there's a chance. I mean, if you remove the obstacles for job failure, the probabilities just go up. So when you pair a solid behavioral-based interviewing process with really sound, statistically validated information, it's like counting cards in Vegas, like you're just upping the odds. And so it's not bulletproof, but we have numerous clients that say, as long as you slow down and do solid behavioral-based interviewing for the things that CI can't measure, and you follow the CI, you're going to hit the ball at about 90%. So that's the whole goal. So yeah, there's no question. I mean, gut is important. You need to listen to your gut, but that as a standalone plus a resume, you're gambling.
The kinds of businesses that are acquired in the ETA search process tend to be quite small, maybe 5 million EBITDA, sometimes even less. Does this approach work at the kind of smallest level of business where you're not hiring someone who's been a partner at McKinsey or something? You're hiring someone who this might be their first job.
Yeah. So most of the origins of Culture Index and the majority of our clients going back in the early years were all less than 50 employees. 10 years ago, probably less than 1% of our clients were PE owned. Now, the customers that I see and that our organization sees here, it's over 50%. So it's designed for the first hire.
Well, let's learn a bit more about you. You have an extensive history as an entrepreneur. You've done this many times. Let's start at the very beginning. Did you grow up in an entrepreneurial environment? Were your parents business owners? How did you get the bug?
Yeah, good question. So we could get into a lengthy conversation, and we might need a bottle of Silver Oak to do that, on how much is nature, how much is nurture. My parents are the most supportive people you'll ever meet. My dad was a minister. My mom was a hustler. You hear a lot of stories of entrepreneurs that come from tragic upbringings, and my parents loved each other. They're still together today, over 50 years together. But I had an older brother that had a very, very bad car accident. He was actually run over by my mom's best friend. Horrible story. But they spent most all of my childhood trying to keep him alive. And so I was kind of known as the feral, free-range kid. So I kind of had to go figure it out. And so we moved a lot, all over the place, scratched to be middle class on our best day. The entrepreneur of my family really was my grandfather. And I spent every summer of my life with him till he passed of cancer when I was 16. So that's where I learned the mindset. But it started, I believe there's more genetics in it, but we could argue that with our PhDs on staff. They would slap me around for just saying that. But the first time I realized I wanted freedom, I wanted agency, I was in kindergarten. And my mom was an artist, so I would spend afternoons in an art studio, and I was sitting there drawing, not paying attention to the teacher, which is the story of my life, and with my adult onset ADD or whatever you want to call it. Then this kid leans over and says, "Hey, can you teach me to do that?" I said, "Sure, 50 cents at recess." So I started, and then I got shut down because somebody told their mom the next day. I tripled revenue day 2 that I had taken their lunch money. I didn't. They gave it voluntary. So I realized in kindergarten I could make money enterprising that way. And then I wasn't old enough. Right after that, I wasn't old enough to play in the Pop Warner Football League, so I started my own. I just went door to door and recruited to start because I was too young and too light to play. So it started for me when I was really young. It came from wanting control of my own destiny. And again, I came from a very loving home, but we didn't have a lot. Sometimes we didn't have hardly anything.
Sounds like the regulatory environment of your kindergarten was not conducive to your
No,
business.
it wasn't. Yeah, there was no capitalism running around in that administration, clearly. Yeah, I was always hustling, doing the typical side businesses, raking leaves and all the stuff. But I went to the only school that I could play football and baseball, small school in Kansas City, mid-America, and then started a landscape business while I was in school, just as a side hustle, and all my buddies worked for me. I started off actually biology pre-med, and I had a professor pull me in and ask me what I was going to do for a living. And I was in love with biology at that point, and I really wasn't interested in med school. So she had a very stern conversation with me. You do realize you have a business mind, right? She basically escorted me over lovingly and said, you're designed to be an entrepreneur. And so fast forward, I was a minority partner, a good friend of mine, about a year before the Great Recession hit, came to me and said, hey, we're going to sell. He said, my gut just tells me this cannot continue forever. And so we closed like 6 months and 1 day before the Great Recession hit. I was trying to find out what my next thing was going to be. And that's how I stumbled into this culture index thing. I was looking for my next thing. I had several offers, partnering in some other companies, had a very comfortable 6-figure income, had a little one in diapers, married to my best friend, Betsy, and everybody thought I was nuts. So the way Culture Index is set up is you come in, you get some training, and then you got to go get your own revenue. And so Betsy and I made the decision many years ago, David, that instead of going with the traditional wealth management world, we're going to invest stock market where we don't know the people. We're going to invest into small business owners. Some are going to hit, some aren't. I got some wins, got some learning lessons, some expensive MBAs along the way. But I've been very blessed to have a few really nice hits along the way. And so here we are.
Would you say that you being attracted to investing and building wealth in small businesses was related to you thinking that it was going to be more successful than the stock market, or simply you just wanted to have that person-to-person interaction and the stock market was too boring and impersonal?
That's a great question. So if I were to go back 24, 25 years ago, it would have been a pure risk tolerance, overinflated self-confidence of we're going to be more successful. What I would say today versus what I said back then, it really has to do with the fact that we do feel like we're in more control of the wins and losses, David, by knowing those people and now using the science that we use. It's counting cards. So we know who to bet on at a higher rate of return than those that we aren't.
Well, we know that you've had some successes. Have you had any investment or business disasters or disappointments along the way that you took some hard lessons from?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no doubt about it, of course, right? I believe fundamentally that, and this is even in our family creed we have on the wall of our entrance, failure is a phenomenal teacher. So growing too quickly without controls in place, being at the wrong place at the wrong time, meaning had all the right people in place, had all the right best businesses practice in place, and private equity changed the landscape on us when we didn't expect it to at a quicker rate of speed. Those are the two big lessons I can think of that cost us.
Let's talk about the ETA search world. I know that that's not your kind of primary stomping ground, but you are adjacent and you're friends with many people in that community. What do you think about the overall structure and almost the philosophy of ETA, which is you get a typically younger person with an entrepreneurial spirit and hopefully some training, perhaps at a business school, and a retiring, let's call it baby boomer of a small local champion type business. And that is sort of a match made in heaven, an American capitalistic success story. What do you think of that narrative? And do you think it's still valid today?
Yeah, a lot to unpack there. I think about supply and demand and the whole idea of, I don't know what statistics you're seeing out there, David, but you got to look at 30 to 50 deals to find a good one. Defining what a good one is, time will tell. I still like the concept of it. I'm concerned about the money looking for employment versus the deals that are actually viable. I'm not convinced there are near enough viable deals for the people that are searching and worried about the conscious bias towards the end of that 12, 18, or 24-month desperation kicking in, and them finding maybe a below average deal, but it looks like a super great deal because they've been looking at really bad deals. So, we'll see what happens over the long haul, David. The most important thing I would say if I were doing that today is the power of a real board. I would absolutely not do it without a board that I reported to, even if it's 100% of my money. So, David, for me, it's around surrounding yourself with the best that you can find and paying them to do it. So whoever you can beg, barter, steal, plead with your ethical boundaries, that's going to up the probability of success significantly by getting some gray hair around you.
Many people who are self-starters also sometimes get a little bit prickly when others are guiding them. So are you able to both be a self-starter and very confident in yourself and also be able to withstand criticism and tough feedback, which is, of course, necessary for growth and success?
To me, that's called wisdom. So that's the difference between me today, staring at 50 here in a couple of months, versus me at 21. And a lot of entrepreneurs are the same way, right? So it's understanding that the scariest situation I walk into is when the CEO is the smartest person in the room. That's a problem waiting to happen. Now, sometimes do they get across the finish line, depending on what the finish line is? Yes. But just if you study great success, 9 out of 10, there aren't very many Elons out there, right, are surrounded by a group of advisors. And a lot of the time you don't know them unless they tell you that are smarter than them. I'm just at a place in life where I would rather have that advice around me, even if I'm giving away 5% of the equity or 10% of the equity to the board and paying them that way. I'd rather have 90% of a larger pie than 100% of a smaller.
I'm interested in your thoughts on an observation that our friends at NCL Partners have, Dustin Sellers and Anthony Walker, which is that they are certainly looking for searchers to back that have the credentials necessary. Maybe they excelled in an MBA program, but if they don't have the EQ, if there is a thought that these highly accomplished people would not really gel well with, for example, a installer of industrial carpeting in St. Louis, that might not be successful. I'm interested in your thoughts around that EQ side of things.
Let's just talk about it generically. Are they smart enough to know when to keep their mouth shut and when not? Is there enough discernment there to know when to defer, and you don't have to win at everything? So if we're talking about EQ as far as understanding when to push further on someone and when to back off, yes. And that goes back to that being the smartest person in the room. You're going to have a real hard time if you excelled at Google or Deloitte or McKinsey with a 26-year-old plumber who has his GED. If you're talking about EQ in and of itself and the ability to know when to engage and how to engage with people, you can learn that, but you've got to want to learn it. Just like we work with a lot of doctors, a lot of attorneys, right? The best in the world have no bedside manner. It's the same thing. You can have very introverted, highly analytical, high IQ people that can learn bedside manner, but do they want to? And are they willing to? Because it sucks. That whole embrace the suck of awkwardness, it's not fun to learn to deal with someone that naturally you want to throat punch before lunch Monday through Friday. So if they're willing to learn and they own I'm looking for people that are aware of their weaknesses and own them. That's the starting point. And if they don't have that, I wouldn't invest.
How about a final topic before we let you go? And this is the big one. It is AI. I'm interested in your thoughts on how AI is going to change the game, in particular for smaller businesses, which might arm a entrepreneur or a business owner of a smaller business with tools that would allow that organization to compete with much larger legacy organizations.
So to me, the biggest return right now today is not the Vegas route of looking for that next thing, right? We're in our generation's industrial revolution, right? There's no question about that now, David. So it's who's going to find the faster tractor to get the deal done. So I was working with a customer recently, no AI experts, in-home services, HVAC. We took the call center down. The people who answer the phone, if you got an HVAC, it's hot. You got a problem, you call in. We went from 15 to 9, and with 1 month hiccup, with AI, we increased the Google reviews. We literally were able to retool 6 great employees into different places of the organization for them to excel elsewhere. So to me, it's all about what can you do today and get an ROI in the next 12 to 18 months, because after that, to me, it's blockbuster. So it's the immediate efficiencies all over the business. and testing very delicately with your customers. So we just went through an in-house thing ourselves, just right here in our DFW office. I wouldn't invest in anything I can't get at least 2x on, ideally 10 in 12 months. And finally, we figured it out, and we did. We're looking at 2.2 year one. If it holds true, it's 5.6 to 6x next year on efficiencies. So it's not looking for this big crazy thing that's going to save the industry. You know, you want to live in the VC world, that's great. I'm more pragmatic coming from an operator mindset. So I'm saying, what can I do today that will efficiently make me stronger? It'll be interesting to see how the whole agent thing, the tokens and everything that's going on with that, like how that's going to work and how much that's going to cost us. But that's what we're doing internally every day, is figuring out how do we use that to work more efficiently, to get more information quicker by eliminating overhead and just cutting that SG&A.
If an entire layer of small and medium-sized businesses in the U.S. and elsewhere becomes meaningfully more efficient over the next few years, I mean, that's an economic boom. I mean, that's huge.
And I see it happening all the time with my customers. It's such an exciting time to be alive if you're a geeks like we are that love to study our favorite sport as business. It's fascinating. You know, when you've got somebody that was an HVAC tech 3 years ago figuring out how to use it efficiently in a call center in a matter of 3 to 4 months, I mean, sky's the limit. It's just leveraging what's out there and getting the systems talking to each other and pulling data. If you're not spending time looking on how to deploy it, I'm concerned.
How about one final question for you? What do you think are the core attributes, the required attributes of a successful entrepreneur within their personality?
Really what it comes down to is it's those entrepreneurs that can surround themselves with who they are not. So this is what we do. We study org charts, we study behavioral analytics and non-clinical psychometrics as it comes to scale. It's a collection of characteristics and behaviors associated with those. If you don't have someone over a body of work, a business unit leader or an entrepreneur that has a high degree of risk tolerance, that thinks at a high rate of speed, then you're going to have problems in any industry. So it really comes down to the risk tolerance associated with getting excited when you sign an unlimited personal guarantee or you're all in at 5x your net worth on that line that you just maxed. If that doesn't excite you, it's going to convolute your thinking. It's going to shut you down. Certain people are energized off of that risk tolerance. Risk is the privilege of admission, not the cost.
Hey, this has been an amazing conversation. Thank you so much, Jason Williford, a serial entrepreneur and a board member and executive advisor of Culture Index. Thanks so much for talking to Search Party today, and I definitely want you back on some future episodes.
Thank you, David. It was an honor to be here, and I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Search Party is sponsored by Boulay, Kilpatrick, Townsend and Stockton, and Oberly Risk Strategies. The lead sponsor is NCL Partners.